Welcome to the East End Education Forum, where we discuss the challenges facing our schools and local innovations designed to meet those challenges. This series is sponsored by the East Hampton Education Foundation. They have provided programming, grants, and scholarships for East Hampton Town Public Schools since 2005. Today, we continue our discussion of the silver lining, lessons learned, with a focus on the student's perspective. We will have two panels today, starting with three middle school students: Melanie Visciano, Patrick Conlon, and Dominic Yushka. Melanie is from Springs, as is Patrick, and Dominic is from Bridgehampton.
Yes.
Okay. We're entering now our third year of COVID. Okay. The third year in a state of what people call trauma that has disrupted your life. For many students, it's maybe even difficult to remember what school was like before. Okay. I'd like you to share the challenges you've faced and what you've learned about yourself and schools and the school system that may help both you and schools adjust to the future. All right, that's big. That's a big, but your perspectives are the most important perspectives in this whole scenario. And the schools have to adjust to you because you are the purpose of school. So what you say, what you think is important. Let's start with, what were the most difficult adjustments you had to make during the pandemic?
Probably online school, because the adjustment of going from person and like seeing everyone's point, like you can see everything like right in front of you. Online school, they have to like send videos, and it's very confusing trying to keep track with work when you can't really get a good look at it.
I agree as well.
So online was difficult because of the work? Was it the
Like,
work
it
or
was,
the communication, or both?
The communication was a bit weird because you were able to just send emails, but sometimes like it didn't go through, and it was like much easier to just
raise your hand and ask the teacher.
Yeah,
the question.
exactly.
But now you'd have to wait until the teacher would be available, or send them an email, and sometimes the email won't go through,
Got
and
it.
it's just difficult.
Got it.
Yeah.
It was the
Yep.
same way for you, Dominic?
Same here with me.
Yeah. Was there anything about learning online that you saw as a positive, as something that maybe would be something you'd want to use in school in the future?
sleep schedules.
What was that?
Sleep scheduling.
Okay, don't laugh, because that's important.
Yeah.
Thinking about when school starts, there's been controversy about that for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starting it so early.
Yeah. So what was good about the sleep schedule? How did it help?
It helped me get prepped up much earlier because I know us two do early school programs
Yeah.
like band and chorus, so it's over the online school like part of COVID, I didn't have to wake up early, and I believe that the early school was almost canceled because
Or no, they schedule it at a different time in the day.
Yeah.
Or just once a week.
so we had some time to get prepped up for the day before we got on our Google Meets.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or I feel like the people who probably benefited from it a lot was the teachers who live far away. Like I know I have some teachers who live like 2 hours away, and then they'd wake up so early to drive down every day.
Right, yeah, that's a difficult thing here in the East End. Just getting here sometimes is a challenge. Do you think your friends would agree with you, or have some of your friends experienced other difficulties that they've shared with you that weren't tough for you?
There are certain friends that might have things a bit differently. Like, I thought earlier before this that lots of kids who like are used to tech, or like younger kids, they kind of understand how it works, and they might be experienced with all the emails and Google
Yeah.
Classroom, so they're all used to it.
Mm-hmm. Dominic, what about you?
I think it was the mask situation.
Okay.
Yep.
What do you mean by the mask situation?
I mean of these.
Just wearing them.
Yeah, just wearing them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it probably makes a pain in the ears for them. But for me, sometimes it's not a big deal. But
Nobody likes it.
yeah,
That's for sure. It's not fun.
Yeah.
What supports, or what things did the school district put into place that you think was the most helpful, that helped you get through? Melanie, what do
Probably,
you-
I guess, like everyone, people that you love, and like your teachers checking in with you a lot. That helped get through it.
Yeah, because if they didn't check in, we would be lost in all of the
Everything.
like messages. Yeah, it would be so like we wouldn't have anything to work off of. I'm more of a visual learner,
Same.
Mhm.
and if I try to look at something, I have to like look at every possible outcome to like make sure I'm doing it right. So my teachers usually I usually check in with my teachers to see if I'm like doing something right.
Yeah.
But usually over COVID, it's not really worth like sending like an email to like go over like, hey,
It's
can
just
we
a
have that?"
problem.
Yeah, it's just a hassle.
Dominic, did your teachers check in with you a lot too? Did you find that helpful?
yeah, I've found that helpful for me.
Yeah. Do you think that you actually had more one-on-one contact with your teacher then than in normal, quote, normal school?
More contact than probably, yeah, because I was just able to communicate much easier, just raise my hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be able to
ask
communicate
the
in
question
a
whenever.
group, but the one-on-one conversation, was there more of that during COVID when you were home, or less? Still,
Less.
still,
I
still
think
less?
But
Okay.
I think we all got to know our teachers a little better then.
Explain that. You felt you get to know your teachers a little better. That's interesting.
Well, I think we all kind of went through the same things in a way. And like our teachers would share a little more to make us feel more comfortable with everything.
Did you all experience that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I all think the teachers, like everyone kind of affected everyone in
Yeah.
kind of an equal way.
Everyone was able to relate to it.
Yeah.
So there was some, almost like common enemy, so you
Yeah, exactly.
got tighter?
Yeah.
That's probably true for most of us.
I feel like lots of us got closer over
Yeah.
COVID. We all kind of grew like bonds to stick together and like work
We
hard to
realized
get through
over-
it
You don't really realize what you have until
until
it's
you've already
gone.
like got rid of it. Yeah.
Cool.
Like we've already gotten through like the bad part of COVID. I think we're getting somewhere now. Like we've already fought through.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. We thought that before. We're hopefully thinking it again, and it'll be true this time.
Yeah.
Which subjects do you think adapted better to online learning? Was there a difference between subjects?
I think that English was probably a bit simpler.
English and social studies probably. were the
Because-
easiest to adapt to.
For me, for our school, we usually just do like reading passages and
Yeah.
they usually just send us a link to a website and we just read off of it. But math is taught by your teacher in front of you.
And science too.
And science, yeah. And you kind of, and they send you a video and it's much like harder to communicate with them, I feel like, to like really learn the steps because math and science, like,
So you can never really be too sure
yeah,
that
like
you're doing everything
chemical
right.
formulas and like
It's so, yeah.
all type of, like it's hard to learn because there's steps involved. So you have to like spend a lot of time.
Learning the formulas.
Yeah.
And then they'll send you off to a different website. Like in my school, we use IXL
Mm-hmm.
or Delta Math too. And they would just put all the questions on there. And since they would only give you like one or two examples, you would never really be too sure if you were doing it right.
Dominic, what about you? Was there any subjects that really were easier to do this, online than others?
I think it was art.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
What about art that made it easier?
I mean, I could actually finally work in peace instead of sometimes even have to try to get interrupted for about 3 minutes, about half a minute every 5 or more minutes.
So in subjects that you really wanted to concentrate and work by yourself, it
Yes.
might have been actually easier just getting the instruction online and working on that at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like our classes, which are, we call them specials because they're not like
Yeah.
They're not,
everyday
like,
classes.
core, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're kind of easy. Like art, like Dominic said, or PE, like they just send you.
They'd be like, go outside and do 10
like-
jumping jacks.
Yeah, exactly. They just send you simple steps, and like if you don't have a piece of paper, that's fine. You can do it another day or something.
Yeah.
So they were more projects than individual lessons?
Yeah.
Yes, it was solo. Like it was independent lots of the time over COVID, which makes sense. 'Cause
So what other subjects could be or were taught that way? Art,
PE,
PE?
facts probably.
Yeah.
It was
facts,
Was-
Yeah.
because facts is has a
health
lot of
class,
different
kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like music or
You know, how did music, how was that?
music was it was
It's
interesting.
interesting. She's at the same time.
Music's like it's got a wide range of stuff you can do with music. It was
Yeah.
mostly like learning the history of famous composers. So
Okay. So the idea
more
of
research,
doing a
yeah.
project, where you're more responsible for getting it done on your own.
on your own.
But the teacher has provided you with the guidelines for what the project should look like and be when it's done.
Yeah.
That worked
At moments.
at moments, depending on the content probably, depending on.
Yeah.
Did it have a lot to do with how interested you were in that topic?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that all makes sense to me, you know, having a self-directed project that also has your interest right from the beginning, you're going to want to do that,
Yeah.
and you're going to want to do your best in that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the other lessons, you're really looking to get the right answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think social studies, science, maybe even math could ever be a project?
Well, you can do like presentations, and there are these things called breakout rooms, which are on
Oh yeah.
meets
on
where you
Zoom.
break kids into different groups and they can work on each other. And usually the teachers let us communicate outside of the like
Outside of-
regulated meets.
Mm-hmm.
And they let us work on our own, but usually doesn't work that well because then again, we still have to communicate with each other on the Chromebook and we can't really see each other. And it's hard to do a project when you're not like next to each other or like doing it
Yeah.
as
You
a.
can't just be like, hey, you want to do this? You have to text them.
Yeah.
Did you use Google Docs?
Yeah, Google Docs, Google Slides.
So you would be able to work on the same document with other
Yeah.
students?
And you don't know,
Yeah.
like, if they're typing something and you're also typing something, like, you can mix up, like, the
Yes.
the layout.
It's just a hassle.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel like you learned something about yourself as a learner? You know, something about how you learn best by going through this?
I've kind of learned that independence is really important in doing work, because
Yeah.
I must say, I kind of did a pretty good job in lasting through the online COVID.
Yeah.
So, and the independence really helps because it teaches you how to be solo
have
and
to
not
be
rely
solo.
on other people.
You have to be so on top of everything.
Yeah.
Kind of taught us all a little bit of responsibility.
Dominic, how about you? Did you feel like you learned to be more independent as a learner?
Yeah, I did. Basically, I did.
Do you think that's really important?
Well, I do think it's important, but not a lot. I don't think it's important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, wait. So you're asking about the independent question.
But you being learning how to be independent when you're learning.
Like, independent when you're learning. Well,
Yeah. In other words, on the projects.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I have to do it by myself, which is kind of really hard to do.
Yeah, it is. I think and correct me if you don't agree, often in school, we do something, we find out if it's correct according to the teacher.
Yeah.
We wait
Exactly.
before we go on
Yeah.
to the next thing. That only happens in school, you know. In the rest of life, when you're doing stuff, when you're working on your play, when
You make your
you're,
own.
you know, working on a sport, when you're working on a hobby at home, you don't stop and say, okay, I have to wait until I find out if this is right.
Yeah, you
Just
keep
move
moving.
on.
You move on.
moving.
And if it's wrong, you go back and fix it later, and that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually kind of super easy for me.
Sorry,
It's actually kind of easy for me.
got it. So, think about that idea of when you're in a classroom working on a lesson, you're waiting to get the right answer, and then you move on after you know that answer's right to the next answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it's set up. But when you're working on something independently, when you're working on something you really want to do, like a project that you really like the topic in, do you wait?
No, I try to move ahead, especially if they give you the main
All the
steps.
material.
If they give you all the material. For us, they usually give us like they give us a message that says, follow this list of rules, fill out all the slides or pages, and
Just they'll give us like the
project.
basics.
Yeah.
And they'll let us have a lot of creative freedom with it.
So now having the creative freedom really means that there's no one way to get it done.
Yeah.
But at the end, there's some sort of way to measure whether you did it right, correct? A
Yes.
rubric
Yeah.
of some
Yeah.
sort?
Rubric,
It
yeah.
gives
Which way is more fun to learn?
creative freedom.
You
I think that.
you think so too?
I agree on that as well.
Or just letting us have a lot of control over what we're doing. Not too much, but just have a better idea of what we're doing, and then go over it at the end.
Yeah. Like an example, like in math class, there could be like a tough problem that has multiple ways you could do it, like different
Yeah.
properties.
Mm-hmm.
And I like use one property, but like you can do it in multiple ways, but it's a property that can be used for all of them. Like it's a definite answer. So I just use the easiest one. Like it's many ways.
I mean, math there usually is
Yeah.
Yeah.
that answer,
Well,
but the
yeah.
There's lots of ways to do it.
pathways to that answer can
Yeah.
vary.
Mhm.
Right. Do you think that you guys are going to be ready for high school, given all the supposed learning loss that has happened during this?
Yes. My brother and sister are in the high school, and
Yeah.
they say that it's
not as bad as-
challenging,
yeah.
but it's able to be handled if you focus on your work and you do what's meant to be done. So I think it's still going to be a challenge, but it's not going to be too much that I couldn't handle.
Yeah.
Dominic, what do you think? You going to be ready for high school?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be prepared. I mean, believe it or not, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what are the challenges going to be? Do you think that those projects, that independence that you kind of were forced into, is that going to help or hurt once you get to high school?
Help.
I think it's gonna definitely help.
I think high school is more of trying to boost that
Yeah.
like feeling of independence by like it's helping you get better and get a feeling of growing up.
Yeah.
So you gotta take that responsibility and use it in the assignments.
Do you think all your friends feel the same way? That first of all,
More or less.
the independence
Yeah.
was good, and that they are going to be ready for high school?
I think they'll be ready for high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to have it handled.
Dominic, you feel the same way? Feeling that your friends are also going to be ready, or are there some friends who look at it differently than you?
There are some friends that I know that they're gonna be ready for high school, and some that are not prepared yet.
You guys feel the same? You know,
Yeah.
Are there going to be some kids who are going to struggle because of this disruption?
Probably, yeah.
It's probably gonna be some.
Why? What's What's going to be tougher for them?
Well, a lot of kids don't, not everyone is good at being productive when being alone or good at focusing.
Yeah, they're more of a group.
More of a, yeah.
So without the teacher's guidance and saying, okay, you finished step 1, now go to step 2, they struggle?
Some
Yeah.
kids.
Okay. Yeah, I would say they're always going to be, all of us learn a little differently.
There's always going to
no-
be one kid who can't, like,
Oh, yes.
no one's perfect.
Often that kid was me. Okay, now, taking this whole experience, these last 2 years, is there anything you can think of that you'd like to see done differently in school? And I'm avoiding saying, get back to normal school,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I don't think we should get back to what was. I think we should learn from what happened, and whatever comes after this should be better.
Better than our past.
Better than was before this
Yeah.
pandemic. So if you had, the power to say, okay, this is what school is going to be from now on, what would you change?
Our school has gotten a recent construction change, so far it's doing pretty nice. I think they got it all handled, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, what would they change? Like,
Probably maybe, I think, a little more chances to interact, like
Yeah.
socially.
they don't necessarily have to get right against each other, but like a chance, more partnership activities. Even though we were just talking about independence, I feel like
They can go
Still need-
together.
yeah.
They can go together. You can have group work that allows independence.
like assigned parts, like assigned steps.
Yeah.
Like one person could have to do this, so no one's like not doing all the work and like they get the same grade thing. Like,
Right, right.
yeah.
What about that idea of having more projects versus worksheets that have a set?
We don't do projects that often because it involves like what we were talking about. Schools don't really,
Like, yeah.
they're not really.
And now you have the
Right.
power to say it can change. So if you did have that power, would you want it to shift to more projects where you get to pick the topic?
Yes.
Yeah.
More creative, like productivity.
So in your favorite subject, it was social studies?
Yes.
Okay, so give me an idea that you would, I'd love to work on this, what would be the topic that you would find really exciting and do your best work?
A topic of social studies would probably be, I guess, ancient civilizations are pretty interesting.
Which one's your favorite?
Rome.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what would you dig into Rome and want to discover?
Probably dig into like their inventions and how they've like evolved in like intelligence and how they've gotten better with creating things that help the humans live and thrive,
Got it.
probably.
Dominic, what about you? What you were talking about home and careers as something you're passionate about?
Yes.
Is there, like, if you could write the curriculum, if you could write what you had to learn, what would be something really cool to dig into?
Family consumer science.
And what topic inside family consumer science? Like, would you like to learn how the chemistry of cooking or something along those lines?
Something along those lines that.
Cool. And Melanie, what about you? You said science?
Yeah. I think I like how my teachers are teaching it to us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little more group work.
Would you like to do research?
Yeah.
So
Probably so.
if you were going to do a research topic, and again, you're in control, you can
Yeah.
choose, what would you want to research?
I'd probably research in science, kind of space in the universe. and things
It's pretty
like
big?
that. Yeah.
What intrigues you about space and the universe?
Just kind of everything. It's so interesting how it's made. How
The Big
things
Bang
happen.
Theory and
Yeah.
all, okay. All right.
how it all came to be.
You have any aspirations to be an astronaut?
Not really.
Not really. That's a little too much.
Yeah.
Stick to the research.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've wrapped up this part of the discussion. I'd really like to thank you guys for your participation
Of course.
and for your honesty. And hopefully we will do this again. Thank you.
All right. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay, and we're back with our second panel. I'd like to introduce Colin Ruddy, I said it wrong, like I said I would, and Kimberly Bermeo, both seniors at East Hampton High School. Again, you saw the interview with the younger students. Let's start with the same question. What were the most difficult adjustments for you during COVID as a student?
I would say it was mentally challenging. COVID brought this huge realistic fear of death for oneself and loved ones, especially if your loved ones were at risk. So not only the mental toll of being in school and having so much work to do and having to do it on your own, but also the additional toll of I have to keep everyone safe.
I think, yeah, Colin, what do you?
Yeah, so like schooling wise, I'd say like the hardest part was probably just like scheduling and like getting on a routine, because like every morning you're constantly just like there was no set like time you really had class, and only like a few classes like met online during like the original like first couple months. So it was hard to like really get on a routine and figure out like when you were doing stuff, because like all the due dates and everything were very lenient. So it was just very hard to like sit down and actually do stuff, because it was just like everything was just kind of up in the air and there was no routine and no schedule for everything to do.
And did you also experience that fear, that trauma of being kind of like, it felt like you felt more responsible for other people's health?
Yeah.
Did you feel that also?
Yeah, yeah, not as like extreme, I guess I would say, but like definitely like you're like constantly like looking out for people and just making conscious decisions of like whether or not to like attend like a social gathering or like something like that.
I know on like Colin's point with like scheduling, I thought it was really hard being in home where you have every distraction, like your distractions specifically in your room, in your home, in your kitchen, that would just like make it even harder for one to just focus and study.
And like with that too, it's like we were constantly just like sitting in our houses all day, so it was like the whole mental side of it was just like that much worse, because it was hard to like really get out and do things, because like social interaction's like important, and just like being around the same like couple people, like your family every day, like it's nice for like the first little bit, but like after a while it's like everything just takes a toll on you, and it's hard to like just like get back to normal. It's just like, you know.
Well, I remember as an administrator in high school, the most important things to students was rarely school, the academic part of school. The most important thing was the social part of school. And that's part of being an adolescent. That's, normal. That was kind of taken away from you.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've, like, for the high schoolers right now, we've all lost like 2 years of socialization. We kind of reverted to like what we were before, like, the pandemic hit. We haven't been socialized into the point of seniors. I feel like we're still like sophomores going into junior year, and I think that's the same for the middle schoolers who have come up into the high school as well.
Yeah, and I definitely noticed that with like the younger kids too. It's like we kind of experienced like having like the upperclassmen in school. Like whenever we were freshmen, we kind of like learned like from them and everything. But like for the younger kids, I noticed that they don't really have like the older grades. Like they weren't able to like look up to the older grades. So it was like there's like kind of a maturity gap, I feel like, between like our grade and like my sister's like a freshman. Like the boys in her grade, I feel like are very different at like this point of the year than like me and my friends were like that point of our freshman year, just from like not really having like not being in school and seeing what like the older kids are doing and stuff like that.
So there's been a ton written about learning loss and like what subject material you might not have gotten during COVID, but you guys are talking more about socialization loss, like mature, the less growth, less maturity.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, middle school is an awkward time, but it's also a learning time. Especially you're going into freshman year. It's a huge time where not only do you meet new people, you get out of your middle school, like elementary school bubble, and you are introduced to so many other new people, perspectives, and it helps you kind of mature. And I think that's what's the problem now, that the incoming freshmen and sophomores haven't gotten that. And it's caused a little bit of trouble when it comes into the high school, because there's a lack of social cues or knowing what's like okay to do in school and what's not.
And with that too, it brings like the whole like social media side of it. It's like the younger kids are just like crazy on social media. And it's like some of the stuff that they're like handling on social media is just kind of like kids in our grade, I think, wouldn't really have done that like whenever we were like that age, just from like them being stuck on their phones and having that as like the only way of like communication the past couple of years.
I think it's definitely obvious that their socialization came from social media and from movies and Netflix, because the activities and stuff like that they do seem movie-like, and when they speak about the high school experience, it's like they want that movie life experience of high school, which is unrealistic.
So, extending that a little bit, do you feel that you also, compared to seniors 2 years ago, aren't socially in the same place that they probably were?
I think to a certain extent we are. Thankfully, we did have that 2 years, us being seniors, that 2 years before the pandemic hit, that we were like mostly socialized. We could have developed more, but we are a bit like behind what seniors would have been 4 years ago.
Colin?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, we like our freshman year and the start of our sophomore year, like before COVID, like at least we were able to see like what the upperclassmen were like, where it's like the 11th and 10th graders now, like they didn't really get to see like that generation of kids that like we got to see our first couple years out of school.
Do you think your friends feel the same way? Do you think this is, from your social groups, that if we had 20 of you here, there would be pretty much agreement?
Yeah,
Definitely. We've had conversations about this, not only in friend groups, but in clubs and like student council, student association. Like this has been a topic of conversation.
What about academically? Do you feel that you've missed something, that you're not as prepared as students pre-COVID would have been?
I wouldn't say we're like less prepared. I feel like we're more prepared for college in a sense that like we got the feeling of like independence and like having to like kind of figure everything out like on our own and not really having like a resource available like at hand, I would say. But at the same time, it I don't know, just kind of like made you appreciate like having a teacher to ask questions to in school. And like even now that we're back, it's like I feel like I'm more like engaged in classroom discussion, actually like taking advantage of being with the teacher.
I agree with like Colin on the sense that it was beneficial for us, but I also have to say there are like definite and obvious downsides. Oh, for one, we did learn how to like teach ourselves or kind of schedule ourselves, find our own motivations to learn. However, I feel like that would be difficult for like younger classmen who are coming in who don't really know the system or how high school like work is handled. And I definitely saw that I wasn't learning as efficiently as I could have. Yes, it did help, but at the same time, at that moment, it was a bit like stressful.
Talk about why did you feel you were not learning as efficiently? What made you feel that way?
Well, I kind of realized that my learning style kind of is better when I have a teacher there, kind of, or other students there, either kind of motivating me to continue working or continue to put my like best foot forward. Also, it was easier to ask teachers questions without getting embarrassed. I think when we were on Zoom, no one wanted to put on their cameras or their mics, mostly because of, I would say, embarrassment. And no one would ask questions, I guess, because of the fear that their voices would be through the speakers in class and on Zoom.
Well, I find it interesting that asking a question on Zoom was more intimidating than asking a question with everybody in the room with you.
I mean, like, you could always, like, walk up to your teacher's desk now, or, like, prior, and just, like, privately ask her, like, a question.
Got it.
But then we're all on the screen, we're all next to our computers, like, listening in, and you're, like, asking a question, and no one really wants to make, like, what we think are, like, dumb questions, but it was useful to ask those questions because it was a way we could learn.
I mean, I'm sure every teacher you had has always said, there are no dumb
There are
questions.
no dumb questions, yeah.
But that doesn't make it any easier to
To say.
throw a question out there you're not sure about. What about you, Colin? Do you have that same?
Yeah, I
experience?
feel the same way. It was just like really awkward to just like unmute and like ask a question in the middle of class because it was like you don't know like when the teacher's gonna start speaking again. Like you don't want to talk over them. You don't want to like talk over like another kid like in the meet or anything. But like one thing I kind of like learned from that and like from being online compared to like being back in school now, like you actually learn a lot from like questions other people may have because it like kind of forces the teacher to like go more in depth into like an area that isn't necessarily like highlighted. So I feel like missing out on that definitely like affected like our classes last year.
So think about that combination of, if, instead of walking up to ask that question privately because it's awkward, and go, but you could do that in a traditional classroom. If we got more used to just asking that question out loud, because from what you said, you benefited, other students benefit from hearing that question and getting the answer, because there are a lot of people who probably wanted to ask the same question. And we're as confused about the same thing, and having a more public discussion might be better. But school isn't there yet. Doesn't seem it's there yet. What did the schools do that you found helpful? What supports did they put in place that helped you get through pandemic, or hopefully through the pandemic?
Academic-wise, I think we were always offered extra help. There was always like a time after school that we could contact teachers. It was also really good for teachers and students to kind of get used to the online aspect of schooling, which made it easier to get in contact with our teachers and other students. On the mental health side, there was like a push of the like social workers and psychologists in the school for those who needed it, which I thought was also helpful because that was also a big aspect of the pandemic hitting us too.
Talk about how did that work? How the push? What do you mean by a push from the
So
support staff?
the support staff, like there were emails sent out like with their contact info, and for those who like didn't know, I know that for me, I didn't know that we had these type of supports until the pandemic, because I guess the school administration saw that this was going on and this was being detrimental to students' mental health, and thought it was necessary to kind of inform the students that this resource is available. And also counselors. I know when I spoke about my like struggle with school and with the like weight of the pandemic on me, my counselor directed me to speak to like the social workers at the school.
Gotcha. And you weren't even aware that those services were available prior?
Yeah, and then like it didn't also seem like Reddit like available at the time. I never really knew about it either,
Right.
freshman or sophomore year. And I guess like it was so apparent during the pandemic because it was so necessary.
Colin, what was your experience?
I felt like with the teachers, like they were very lenient with like due dates and stuff. And I felt like that was like really important because it's like obviously things would like come up throughout like the pandemic, and it's like sometimes the doing your schoolwork, like it'd be hard to get it done like on time, but just like having the teachers be like really lenient about like when you turn stuff in like was really helpful because it just kind kind of took the stress off of like doing everything on time. Like obviously, like I would try to get everything done on time, but just sometimes it would be like pretty hard to, and just having like that extra like leniency was just like really beneficial. Just took a lot of stress off.
Do you think that type of leniency as far as due dates is something that should continue, or would make it too difficult for teachers to manage school?
Like to an extent, like obviously there was like some kids who like took advantage of it and like just like really wouldn't get their work done and would just kind of like keep making up excuses. But like kids who like actually had like valid excuses and like who have valid excuses, like I think that like leniency is good, and just like not getting points off for like not doing something on time because like something comes up, like I think that should carry over.
I mean, in any system, there's always going to be an abuse of
Yes.
it.
Yes.
But like as Colin said, it did take off like a significant amount of stress. But I think like it was also necessary to have that due date, because of the lack of motivation that came along with online learning, we kind of needed that due date to kind of remind us, hey, we should start this, or we should get this done.
Right, right. Did you guys find any subjects that translated better than others to online learning, or any styles of instruction that translated better to online?
I guess just having like videos to like look back on, you could kind of like rewatch the lesson and like really like pause it and like take a minute to like understand it, rather than just like them teaching and then like say like you had to like let your dog in or something. It's like you had to go up and like figure that out, and you like miss a portion of like the class, like those couple of seconds.
Right.
Where it's like having a video, like you could just go back and watch it and like kind of do it at your own pace.
I agree somewhat. For me, like the majority of my subjects, I didn't feel that it translated well. However, I do like having teachers there and students there. It helps me learn. But classes like art, math, or science, I did feel like the transition wasn't very clean, especially for art. There was this whole like, how do you perform, like do in our class online when everyone has different projects. And for math, yeah, we already had that kind of like, we watch videos, which was still like easier to get through, but the lessons were always still on Zoom, which I guess like there was always that distraction there.
Were the Zoom lessons recorded so you could go back and look at them, or no?
Not for me. don't know
Like
about
somewhere.
Somewhere? That, you guys have used Khan Academy at some point?
Yes.
Okay, so the whole theory behind Khan Academy is the lessons are set up so that you can go back and look at them, like you had said before.
Mhm.
So if you were distracted or you didn't understand something, you can go back and look at the explanation over and over again. And many students find that incredibly valuable. Do you think that's something that maybe could carry over past this pandemic as a positive things for school?
Yeah, I think so. I think like from like the online standpoint, but like whenever you're in class, you like don't have the distraction, so you're kind of like more focused, and you don't necessarily need to like go back as often as you would.
You don't have to
whenever
walk the dog.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whenever you're at home.
I think like definitely, especially like now, having the online aspect or having like integrated things like Google Classroom and Zoom and Google Meets has been very beneficial to schooling as a whole. For one, like for students who miss class, now there's the option to like join in on the Google Meet, which wasn't priorly done. Or like if you're on vacation or something like that and you still want to be like up to date with class, you still have your videos, you still have the notes online that the teachers now put there. And I think it's very beneficial to make sure that there's an easy transition for a student who, let's say, like wasn't there a day and then can easily get that lesson back.
So when you're homesick, you can still go to school,
Yeah.
at least in a greater capacity than prior.
Yeah. I know like for when someone like this year, like I got COVID in early December,
Mhm.
and it always worried me that I would be behind on classwork. But still, there was, thankfully, because we had gone through like the pandemic and going through online school, there was already that option of like, hey, there's these tutoring sessions, you can join in into your Google Classroom. Even though I couldn't be present in school, I could still be present in the lesson.
Right. Cool. Colin, you have anything?
Yeah, like kind of going back to what we were saying before, like just the one downside of like having that like availability to like do that, it's like kids like abuse it kind of, and just like if they're home, like they would just like choose to be home and just not like wake up to go to school, where they have the option to just sit at home and sit in their bed and just listen in from their bed.
So this is a question I've always struggled with. Should we be designing schools, the rules that go with school around those people who are most likely to try to get away with stuff? Or should we make the rules focused on what's best for learners?
Probably learners.
I would say learners, in any case, like I said prior, there's always going to be an abuse of whatever system is put in place.
Right.
Someone's always going to find a way to do something.
Do you feel like that's the majority or the minority? I mean, how many kids do you feel during this process were just gaming the system? And how many were just struggling and trying to learn as best they could?
I would honestly say probably like close to half and half. Because I mean, like I'm like both of us are in like AP classes and everything. It's like you're surrounded by people who like want to do good and like want to get really good grades and everything.
Right.
Where it's like in like other classes, I guess you kind of have kids in the classes that aren't necessarily trying to like get the best grades and don't really care about getting 100 on the test or anything.
I would say like it leans more towards like the minority of those. However, I would still say it's pretty close. I would say like a 35-65 kind of thing, or like 40-60 kind of thing.
See, even though I was a teacher and a principal and an assistant superintendent eventually, I was one of the kids who would have just gamed the system. I was not you guys. That's who I was at that stage in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I wonder if, given, I always had trouble with all the rules, but I wonder how it would have been if the rules weren't as annoying to me, if I would have been a better learner. I was more, you know what I mean? And I think that you probably know, you probably have friends like that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
This whole process, this whole struggle, what did you learn about yourself and how you learn?
I kind of realized that I value a lot having a teacher there. The teacher, like, not only just being physically there puts like another layer of like motivation to, oh, I should do my work. I should be doing my work. I guess it's like that authoritative figure being like, oh, I should be doing what I need to do. Not having that online, because you're in your own home, you're in your comfort zone. I worked in my room because that was where my desk was and everything. But my room was also my space of relaxing that had to quickly change into half comfort zone and half work school zone, which was hard to maintain. And I kind of had to learn to separate the two, and also learn to push myself and motivate myself without having that teacher there.
Colin?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of like learned that I'm like kind of not dependent, but like having like friends around and stuff to like bounce ideas off of while like doing work, and have like a teacher right there to like bounce an idea off of, or just like have a conversation about the topic. Like I really like found that like that it was really important to me, and it really helped me grow as a learner. And like not having that, it was harder to like actually like digest the material and like really comprehend it. Because like whenever you have conversations with like your friends and stuff, like sometimes it's better than with a teacher, because you like hear the way like they interpret it, and then like collaboratively you like get a good understanding of the material.
You also get a little bit more comfier because you can ask your friend any question, and I guess it's not that pressure either of like, oh, what is the teacher going to think if I ask this question?
Well, one of the things that, and I'm sure in most of your classes, and you two as students want the right answer. It's hard to venture out there and say, well, this might not be right, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's kind of not how we're taught to do school. which maybe isn't the best way, because your discussions with your friends, when you're more comfortable with maybe being wrong, you find much more productive, and that's how you learn.
Yeah.
So maybe when we talk about how schools should shift, maybe that's one of the things we should be shifting towards. How prepared do you feel for college?
I think the pandemic like added that layer of preparedness when it comes to individuality and like self-motivation when it comes to schooling. Like I know like teachers and students have said like these kids who have gone through the pandemic have been more prepared for college than prior students because they had to be independent and motivate themselves and get that like somewhat college experience early on. So I feel like for one, I am more prepared for college, but I do think that I missed a little bit of that like education side in the year of virtual where I didn't learn as efficiently. But there was that I learned how to learn.
Colin, how about you?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Just like having that like year of like kind of independence really like seems like set us up for college because like a lot of my friends and stuff that are like in college, they say oh it's just like very independent. It's just like doing everything on your own and just like finding your own motivation to like actually do all your work. I feel like we already have like some experience with that, like going through COVID and like having to kind of figure it out on our own.
I always told students, and especially high school students, that the most important thing you're going to learn is how you learn. If you figure that out, you'll do fine in college, and then you'll be able to learn independently. One of the things college professors complain about is how much hand-holding usual freshmen in college need or are used to and don't get. And that's why many students struggle their first year in college. So you guys, it would be interesting to see in 4 years how well you did in college and how well prepared you were compared to prior years because of that independence that you were forced to learn. Maybe that there should be more of that.
Yeah.
So now think about what things we learned from COVID, what changes you would like to see in school. And I know you're both AP students, and so you're good students, and you make your teachers happy. But make believe it wasn't about keeping anybody else happy. It was about you learning as best you can. What would school look like if you could make the rules?
I would definitely make it more conversational, more interactive. I think my favorite subject is math, and I think it's because there's a difficulty in conversation when you work. There's always that need for questions, and I think every class should be like that, in which like the difficulty should be at the right level, but it should induce conversation between teacher and student, not like teacher doing lesson and letting like the kids listen. I don't feel like that's the best specifically for me. The classes I've learned best in have been where there's been conversations of this topic between student and teacher and where questions are asked and opinions are given.
Colin, how about you?
I just think that like hopefully in the next couple of months we get rid of like the masks and everything because I mean they're just like I just feel like there's a big distraction most of the time during class and I just feel like without them it would be pretty nice.
I also think the capping off of like capacity things, because right now like the sports and like extracurriculars, like the play or things like that, you have like a cap off of like what you can do, like where you can go. I can't wait for that to be like gone because I think those extracurriculars and that experience like should be more open to that.
Well, I think that the masks, the numbers restrictions, things like that, that'll go away.
Yeah.
And hopefully when school gets back to its new self, it will learn from this experience and hopefully open up a little bit more. Colin, Kim, thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate you being here and I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you for having
Thank you.
us.